The film opens with two young men in a train carriage, becoming acquainted. They are Paul and Sebastian. However, their personalities are very different. Paul is known as a quiet teenager, while Sebastian tends to be wild and unruly. One time, while they were at a convenience store, Sebastian boldly took a drink without paying. This action shocked Paul, as he hadn't expected his friend to be so bold. Both of them were still attending the same private school. But at their young age, life felt bland and boring. They began to lose direction and felt uninteresting. Paul himself lived with his mother, who lived a simple life and was often ill. One day, Sebastian took him to an old building, a place he often visited. There were many bottles of drinks and magazines with photos of beautiful women that Sebastian had stolen from the store. They glued the photos together and began fantasizing about making out with the models. Some time later, they returned to the same convenience store and saw the shopkeeper, Sonia, tidying up the stock. At that moment, Sebastian returned to get a drink there. But this time, Sonia reprimanded him, and Sebastian was forced to pay for it. This minor incident angered Sebastian. That night, he invited Paul to follow Sonia with her boyfriend, Chris. In Paul's apartment, Sebastian and Paul spied on Sonia and Chris making out through the window. After they were done, they lured Sonia outside, knocked her unconscious, and took her to the old building. There, they didn't do anything to Sonia. They simply tied her to a chair and left her there. Seeing this, Paul felt sorry for Sonia and gave her something to drink to help her survive. Meanwhile, Chris began searching for his girlfriend. He asked Sonia's co-workers about her, but no one knew where she was. Since meeting Sebastian, Paul had often come home late, making his mother suspicious of his activities. The next day, Paul arrived first at the empty building and saw Sonia cold. He took off his jacket to warm her up. Unfortunately, Sebastian arrived and took it back. From this, Sonia learned that Paul wasn't like Sebastian. He was actually a good person but had fallen into the wrong crowd. Shortly afterward, Sonia asked permission to relieve herself. They gave her the opportunity, but Sonia tried to escape. Unfortunately, her attempt failed, and she was caught again. Shortly afterward, Sebastian tried to show Paul Sonia's treasure. At that moment, Paul nearly lost control, but fear made him retreat to a corner and exercise alone, knowing what he meant. Sonia then asked Paul for help again, saying she needed medication stored in her apartment. Sonia then gave Paul the key. However, when Paul arrived, Chris and his dog were already there. The incident escalated. Paul was chased and eventually caught, exposing their whereabouts. At the hideout, Chris tried to free Sonia, but Sebastian appeared and overpowered Chris and his dog. Chris was tied up with Sonia. She screamed for help, but the place was far from the crowd. An argument ensued, and an irritated Sebastian threatened Chris with a gun. Chris was fearless and challenged Sebastian, and in the end, Sebastian became annoyed and killed Chris. When Sebastian wanted to take Chris away, Paul secretly tried to release Sonia. However, Sebastian returned and tried to force Sonia to be intimate. Seeing this, Paul prevented him and successfully knocked Sebastian unconscious. After being freed, Sonia then asked Paul to treat Sebastian the way she treated him. Sonia would reward him with affection if Paul complied with her request. Finally, Paul experienced intimacy for the first time. He was very happy. Life was so beautiful, and there were so many interesting things he could try. And finally, the film ended.